Can you hear me? Oh, wow. My mic sounds a lot better, no?
Over to Greenfield, my farm that I told you all about is 2 or 3 miles away, so it's very close. And I have all,
Yes, there's a
plenty of
press
clothes over
conference
there.
coming.
So I told him I was going over there to shower and put on fresh clothes and that I would meet him at Moselle.
And did you go to Moselle?
I did after I left Greenfield. Yes, sir.
And do you remember who was there when you got to Moselle?
I was the first one there.
And what'd you do?
I just went and stayed there until I knew Buster, Brooklyn, and Alec were coming. I suspected that other family members and partners, I knew others were coming. So I just kind of sat there and it just didn't.
I'm just waiting for the press conference to start because I did not know that they were going to do one. I know the prosecution, the state did one yesterday, but I heard defense will be doing one. So I'm just waiting for that to switch on over. Welcome in, everyone. If you haven't heard, I have now got memberships. Holy cow. And the top tier will also be for, I will give you a monthly 15-minute reading and other giveaways and perks. I'm excited for that. Now, did y'all want to listen to this part or just wait, or music? What would you like? Hey, Linda, long time no see. Good to see you, love. Welcome in. Yes, Melissa, I'll put it in right now. And it's also in the description. All of my links are in the description as well.
Not cleaned up.
Were there skull fragments?
Yeah, so, excuse me, this is going to be really difficult.
Thank you,
So
Melissa. Welcome.
I could easily see where Maggie had been. I saw the night before where the sheets were, and somebody had told me that who was who. And so I could see where Maggie had been, and it was grass, and, they had covered it up with dirt. So there really was nothing to see where Maggie was. I walked over to the feed room, and y'all have heard the descriptions. Y'all saw it. I've never seen pictures, and I've told them before coming to this court that I was not going to see pictures. But y'all can imagine what I experienced. It had not been cleaned up. I saw blood. I saw brains. I saw pieces of skull. And when I say brains, it could just be tissue.
I
don't know what
honestly
else.
wonder
It was terrible.
if they're going to do an appeal or not, because he's
And
got
for
so many
some
other
reason,
charges. Is it even
I
worth
thought
it?
it was something that I needed to do for Paul to clean it up. Felt like it was the right thing to do. I felt like I owed him, and I started cleaning. And I can promise you, no mother or father or aunt or uncle should ever have to see and do what I did that day. I don't
Out
know.
of everybody he's seen,
I'm not blaming anybody,
genuine.
but it's just.
But that's just my
I was just
opinion. Out of
overwhelmed.
everybody,
I did everything I
the
could.
most genuine and in the
I
sense
would have
of
moments where
everybody else seems pretty
I would
arrogant.
stop crying for a moment. and just, just in disbelief. At one point, I called my brother Randy and told him what I was doing, trying to describe what I was doing, and
I
he
will be
immediately
doing a
told me
live
to
tonight
stop
for
doing
F
it.
It
It
Friday
was not
and
good
have a
for
little
me. It was
fun.
not healthy for me to be there, and I couldn't stop. I had to do it for Paul. That's just what I had to do.
Well, I remember I was sitting with you, Rich Schoenstein, in this very seat when John Marvin took the stand a few days ago, and he was very emotional, as you just saw, talking about cleaning up after the murders. How do you think the jury ultimately took his testimony and held their decision?
So this was heartbreaking testimony. This was by far the best witness the defense put on, and it was very wise of them strategically to put him on last. He was their cleanup batter, so to speak, and he was raw and emotional and spoke from the heart. And I think maybe that affected the jurors, but he couldn't really say anything that proved Alec Murdaugh's innocence. He didn't offer an alibi. He never really came right out and said, I don't think he did it. He didn't offer facts that differed from what the jury had heard about the night. He didn't have an explanation for Alec Murdaugh's lies about where he was immediately before and immediately after the murder. He didn't have other suspects who might have committed these killings beside Alec Murdaugh. So great witness, really emotional, and probably resonated for the jury. And my heart goes out to him and the people in his family who were damaged by what Alec Murdaugh did, but he couldn't establish a defense.
Yeah, a family that will forever be broken now. And Matt, what do you think John Marvin is thinking now that his brother has been convicted? Do you think he truly believes in his brother's innocence, or was that all a show?
The thing about this testimony is how many people have been impacted by this case and by these murders. Family and friends and so many people that were led astray by Alec Murdaugh. So, he's a smart guy. He certainly came across as someone who has thought about this and has really been hit by this whole act. He sat there, he listened to the testimony. I mean, he has to, I would assume, either conclude what the jury concluded or continue to deceive himself that his brother's not capable of doing something like this. But as you said, he doesn't point out any alibi. He doesn't say, hey, my brother was incapable of doing this. He just says what a horrific incident it was and how it impacted him, and I'm sure many, many others.
Well, John Marvin was also the person to find victim Maggie Murdaugh's cell phone. Let's hear what he had to say about that.
What do you do next?
Mark basically got me. I'm sure I was just a basket case, but he got me back to the house and, got me back around family and, just got back to, the support of others that were there. And there were a lot of people at the house at that point.
Do you remember when you got back to the house, at some point in time, people raising questions or bringing up the fact that Maggie's phone had not been located?
Yeah, so that was, particular the lawyers, they were all, being lawyers, they were, questioning things amongst themselves and, how could this happen, trying to figure things out. But it was brought to my attention that Maggie's phone was not there and that law enforcement had not found it. And I can't say that, in fact, I can probably say that I didn't think of it because I'm not a big phone user or a big app user or whatnot. But somebody brought it to my attention and says, listen, if Buster or Alec, if they have an app on their phone, like Find My Phone or Find My Friends or an app like that, they said you very likely can find out where the phone is if the battery's not dead. And so I went to Buster and sure enough, I said, Buster, do you have one of these apps like they're talking about? And he said, yeah, sure I do. I said, well, open it up. He opened it up and he handed me the phone, and I see Maggie's name, and I press it where, to activate it, and it pings Maggie's phone just out front of the property. I was like, I hate to say it, but I said, holy shit, there it is. And I said, Buster, I'm taking your phone. I'm gonna go back down to the shed and show it to law enforcement.
And who did you approach first about the phone?
Well, I don't know who it was. Presumably it was SLED agents, because keep in mind, I didn't know any of these guys with SLED. I mean, there were a couple of faces that I'd seen before, but I don't know these guys. I've come to know them, but I don't know them or didn't know them then. So I went up to a SLED agent or two SLED agents and said, presumably SLED agents, and said, hey, I've got Buster's phone here, and it's got an app on it that can find the phone, and it's showing Maggie's phone's right out here. Y'all want to let's go get it. And he said, no need. We have technology coming later today that we should be able to find it. And it blew me away that I'm sitting here showing them where Maggie's phone is, but they won't take the time to walk with me or take this phone itself. I mean, I'd give them the phone to go find it. So I walk over, I knew Duffy Stone. He was the solicitor. I knew one of his investigators. I walked over to them, said the exact same thing, and they immediately said, absolutely, let's go find this thing before the battery goes dead.
And what happened?
That we did that.
And
Well, we started walking down the back entrance, or the kennel entrance, if you will. And as we were, and at that time, the agent was holding the phone. I'm looking at it with him. And when it pings, it creates a dot or location. And that dot jumped from right at the end of that road down the road, I don't know, maybe a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile. And so we walked back, got into a car, and drove down to where it was showing the phone.
And was the phone?
And I rode with those agents, the solicitor's office agents.
Was the phone ultimately located on the side of the road?
Absolutely. We found it in a matter of minutes.
Okay. Do you remember how it was collected? I mean, were you present when it was collected?
I was. So I was on there's a cow pasture on one side and it's wooded on the other side. And I was on the side, the cow pasture zone, if you will. And I heard him say, I got it. And so, of course, I walked back beside his car, and I'm good ways from it, but I see him over there. And I think he took either some ribbon or some flagging or flagging tape and marked the phone. And I don't think he touched it. I think he left it right where it was, called SLED. And maybe at that time, maybe they had been communicating, but SLED had blocked off the road at this point, and one of the agents came up and picked the phone up. Okay. And I don't know which agent.
So Matt, what was interesting here was, why would someone who John Marvin thought was a SLED agent disregard his first attempt to find Maggie's phone? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's an interesting point, but I think it's much ado about nothing. I mean, certainly you have a number of SLED agents are there. You have a number of other law enforcement agents there. They're all going to be trying to act in unison, but they don't necessarily do that. Sometimes it's one particular department is thinking one thing and another department is thinking another. He may have been told, hey, we're bringing this stuff in. Don't anybody, leave the area right now. I mean, there's just a whole lot of different things there, and I don't think that it had much of an impact, if any. They had bashed SLED throughout the trial, the defense, and ultimately that did not create any doubt with this jury, especially seeing how quickly they came back with guilty verdicts. So I just don't think it's that significant, and it ultimately was addressed very quickly.
Rich, cell phone data was huge in this trial. After all the testimony that we heard, how big was that in the forefront of this trial, you think?
The prominence of a cell phone or cell phones in this trial was amazing. I mean, think about it. We had to hear from Paul's cell phone to get the kennel video. we had to find Maggie's cell phone and tie that to Alec Murdaugh's travels that night. And then we had to get Alec Murdaugh's cell phone and see the steps he took in a sudden flurry of activity. Those cell phones tell you who was there and when, the steps they took, the path they traveled. We think of cell phones as communication devices, but they're really surveillance devices in the modern world. And without the cell phone data that was in evidence in this trial, there wouldn't have been a conviction.
Well, it was certainly a game changer because one of the key pieces of evidence is what you mentioned, Paul Murdaugh getting that kennel video. And of course, it was on the cell phone. All right, we're going to take a quick break here on Law and Crime, but much more to do here covering the trial of Alec Murdaugh. Stay with us. We'll be right back. joining us here on Law and Crime. Convicted murderer and former attorney Alec Murdaugh was sentenced to life in prison this morning, and this came after the guilty verdict was reached last night by a Walterboro jury who were convinced beyond a reasonable doubt that Murdaugh killed his wife Maggie and son Paul. A defense press conference will be starting soon here, and while we wait, I do want to check in with our boots on the ground, but before we get to that, let's show you once again this morning's sentencing. Okay, we're not going to show you that. We're having a little bit of technical difficulty. We're going to get our boots on the ground. With us right now is South Carolina local and law and crime correspondent Gigi McKelvey, who has done a terrific job the past 6 weeks. Gigi, what is going on out there in Walterboro right now?
Just a lot of standing around, a little bit of hurrying around. We're all waiting on that press conference. There's members of the community here, just people that have traveled from across the state and different states, just hanging out in front of the courthouse, sort of taking this in. The circus will pack up and leave soon. So I think they're coming to get a glimpse of everything going on down here one last time.
Well, Gigi, for viewers who are just joining us, take us through the vibe in that courtroom this morning for the sentencing, especially that exchange between Judge Newman and Alec Murdaugh.
Yeah, it was it was a heavy air in there. The family, very stoic, not really reacting too much. A couple of times the sister shook her head in disagreement as Judge Newman was talking. And Judge Newman did not hold back and talked about the privilege that he was born into, and you were in my profession, and we all know the black eye that he put on the legal community in the state and really across the country, and what he's done. And I think one of the most powerful things that Judge Newman said, and I don't know word for word, which is you have to see Maggie and Paul every night you close your eyes. And I thought that was very, very powerful to remind him that he's now a convicted murderer, and that's on him, and he has to live with what he's done. So I thought Judge Newman did a great job. He's been so respected throughout this trial. And I think that he very gently, without being overly harsh and mean, but very pointed, let Alec Murdaugh know you're a liar. Nobody believed you. You did this yourself. And now you're going to sit in the Department of Corrections the rest of your natural life.
Yeah, I found it to be very respectful, very genuine, the way Judge Newman spoke to him. We do hear, Gigi, a defense press conference will be starting up in a few minutes. What do we expect to hear in that, and who do you expect to speak?
I know that Jim Griffin and Dick Harpootlian will be speaking at that press conference. Maybe they'll give us a little roadmap of where they plan to go from here. If they plan to file some appeals, I'm sure that'll happen at some point. So just interested to see their take on what they thought about the verdict and maybe where they went wrong. I think the kennel video is really the big elephant in the room. And we know one juror said that it was the kennel video that convinced two holdouts that he was guilty, and it took 45 minutes to do so. So very interesting. Throughout the trial, there have been two we've watched. I'm curious which two were the holdouts, but in the end, everybody came around and got that verdict in 2 hours and 50 minutes.
Yeah, 2 hours and 50 minutes indeed. And this morning we heard from one of the jurors who spoke on Good Morning America, Craig Moyer. And he had a very fascinating things to say about the whole trial. He said that Alec Murdaugh was a very good liar, but he just wasn't good enough. And of course, he said it took 45 minutes to an hour for all of this to come into fruition, for them to make their decision. Was everyone really surprised by this kind of running around last night?
Oh yeah, it was very sudden. I was over across the street in the media center. It's the wildlife center, so an alligator greets you when you walk in. But I was just trying to get a little work done and just saw some motion. I got a text saying you might want to go to the courthouse. So I came over. We thought maybe it was I'm getting pelted with these leaves, by the way, if you see me dodging. But we were told to go up in there. We thought maybe a jury question and weren't sure. But when the family came in looking very nervous, we thought, this could be it. Shortly after that, the bailiff came and let everybody know when the verdict is read, no outburst, clapping, keep it to yourself or we'll kick you out. So we knew then we were in for a verdict. And man, that wait until Judge Newman came in felt like a week.
Well, every moment thus far in the past 6 weeks, but definitely in the past 24 hours has been really riveting. And one other moment this morning that I really thought stood out was when Judge Newman mentioned how Alec Murdaugh's grandfather's picture had hung in that courtroom. And obviously, we know that the Murdaugh family has a lot of clout in that community. But now with this sentencing hearing going down, with him having a life sentence in prison, do you feel that the culture of the community is going to change at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's very pointed as far as who was on the Murdaugh radar, depending on what you did and what you knew about him. But I think that there's just a sense of relief in this community that this is over. This Walterboro is such a beautiful place, and it's sad now that it's known as kind of Murdaugh country. But the people here are amazing, but very, very glad a verdict has been reached, and that now life here in this very small, quaint southern town can get back to normal at a much slower pace, I imagine.
Well, Gigi, I know that you have to get back into that courtroom soon as I get ready for that press conference, actually, that the defense is having. So I'm going to let you go. But I do want our viewers now to take a look once again at that sentencing from this morning. Take a listen.
Mr. Murdaugh, I sentence you to the State Department of Corrections on each of the murder indictments in the murder of your wife, Maggie Murdaugh. I sentence you for a term of the rest of your natural life for the murder of Paul Murdaugh, whom you probably love so much. I sentence you to prison for murdering him for the rest of your natural life. Those sentences will run consecutive. Under the statute involving possession of a weapon during a violent crime, there is no sentence where a life sentence is imposed on other indictments. That is the sentence of the court, and you are remanded to the State Department of Corrections.
No matter how you look at it, a very powerful sentencing for Alec Murdaugh this morning. The defense is expected to have their press conference in just a few moments down in South Carolina. We're going to have that for you, but we are going to take a quick break here on Law and Crime. Stay with us, much more to cover.
So I definitely, hey everybody. I definitely am curious of what they're going to say in this press conference. I am really curious. Because there's not much you can say, especially when, if you heard what they said, it was roughly 45 minutes of deliberation and they came up.
We are following the Murdaugh family murder trial, and that has officially wrapped up this morning with a life sentence handed down to Alec Murdaugh by Judge Clifton Newman. The disgraced former attorney was found guilty of murdering his wife Maggie and son Paul on June 7th of 2021, as that verdict came down last night. Throughout the trial, we had several expert witnesses with differing opinions. For example here, defense witness and forensic engineer Mike Sutton testified to the height he believed the shooter to be. Take a listen.
So position me as that shooter would be. I'm trying to figure out where, how would they hold the gun up here, down here, where?
And then you want to push it down on the hip. Your wrist will have to bend.
This wrist?
Right.
I remember this was in the very beginning.
Like this?
Yeah, and you could crouch in some sort of a shooter stance, but that's
Not much lower than
That's
this.
going to be variable, yes.
Okay, and as I approach the quail pan, the gun has to go up.
Well, it stays the same angle, right? But for different height people, the gun has to get higher and higher, right? Like that.
And if I go backwards, it's got to get lower and lower.
Right, because if you walked up to the quail pen, the hole's 50 inches above the ground, which is right here.
So I'd have to be like that,
Slightly down, right?
like this.
For your height, right? About
Just
a little bit lower, not about like that.
At the quail pen.
That's what. So you can see, if you back up, you have to get lower and lower and lower. Not like, but the gun has to stay the same angle.
Oh, so it's got to be up, but
Up.
I go down
You go down
or get short.
to put the barrel on that green line.
So if I'm 6'4", and you measured Alex's foot to knee,
Right.
so where would this gun be placed on me if I'm 6'4"?
Well, if you're 6'4", you know, your hip is going to be about 46 inches, which will be about right here. That's 46.
Right,
And so you've got your trigger hand
right.
about where your hip is. So it would have to be, your trigger hand is going to have to be up where I'm pinching the tape measure.
And this is how far away from the quail pen?
Well, it could be anywhere, but if you raise it some more, a little bit lower, right? So then, if you're at the quail pen, the hole is right here, right? Even if you shoot from the hip,
You have to shoot like that.
yeah, you'd have to shoot lower.
If I'm back where you say the lines converge, I think it has to be pretty low, right?
Yes, it has to be very low. That's why it's to get a position that would be either shooting or aiming,
Right.
or, a basic shooting position, you need to be shorter. If you're bending over in some other body position, that may be, maybe somewhat of an awkward shooting position, then you can be taller, right? You can be taller than 5 feet or 5 foot.
But his, I think he told us his foot to knee was 25 inches.
25 inches.
And would it be, I mean, proportionally for me, where would I?
Fortunately for you, your trigger hand is going to have to be back down where your kneecap is.
Right about here?
About like that, right? And then point upwards 3 degrees. That would be the equivalent of somebody who's 6'4" in the area where the two shot lines cross, shooting into the quail.
I'm
pen.
just trying to wait
They
for
would
the
be
darn
holding the
press
gun
conference.
like that.
That
if they
took
were on
forever
those
yesterday, so I'm only imagining what it'd be today.
Okay, thank you. Please take a stand. Based on the angles and the basically trigonometry is what you're saying. You say the shooter would have been between 5'2" and 5'4", and back to have the ejected shells in the appropriate place. You can mark that place on this sketch where these two folks are. That's sort of the range.
Yes, and you can see some of the ejected shells, but they're right beside the body,
Right.
just off where I've got the yellow sticky.
Okay.
That is the area where you
I hope
have,
everybody's having a beautiful day, by the
I
way.
believe 2, 3, and 4. So 3 empty, 300 blacked out cases.
This microphone is night and day,
And that
y'all.
would be consistent with the position of the shooters in this position and based on the angle of the,
Aw, thank you, Linda. I know I'm waiting to see what they've got to say. They had a big
Okay.
uphill battle and still do.
they would be
The
somewhere.
good old boy is at his finest,
That is
having
correct.
each other's back.
To have a shot
Yeah.
from the hip. the lower part
Forensic
almost
is one
crossed
of
down.
my
Yes.
So
fascinations
my legal
too.
panel of Rich Schoenstein and Matt Mangino are back.
Computer
with
science,
me.
not so much,
Looking
that's
back
Chinese.
here, the defense put forward the idea that it would be unlikely that Murdaugh could be the shooter because of his height. Was this all a stretch, Rich?
I think it was a little bit of a stretch. I mean, the prosecution sort of made fun of it through the trial, but at the end of the day, I don't think it mattered. All of this expert
Thank you,
testimony,
Seorg. Good to
neither
see you, love.
side had a convincing advantage in the experts. The prosecution had a little bit
Very
of an
much
advantage because
appreciated,
their
and I
experts did
appreciate
more
you.
work with the actual crime scene. But when Alec Murdaugh took the stand for a day and a half, this case turned into a case
I
about
just
his
saw that
credibility.
Tennessee
Unless there was
proposed
a conclusive
an
expert
option
on
to
one
hang,
side or
just
another,
kind of like
the jury
Idaho with
wasn't going to
the
focus on that. And I don't think in their
rifle.
2-hour and 50-minute
called?
deliberations that the jury thought a lot about the expert testimony.
Well, definitely all eyes were on Alec Murdaugh when he did take the stand. But meanwhile, the state brought on a crime scene
I need more
investigator.
caffeine.
That's Dr. Kenneth Kinsey, and he completely disagreed with that line of questioning that we just saw. Let's listen to that and we'll discuss it.
Thank you,
From
Seorg.
what you've observed in this crime scene, was Maggie moving at the time she was shot?
This was a very dynamic crime scene. I believe everything was moving. The victims and the
Yes,
suspect
Chuck,
were moving.
firing squad.
And how do
Thank
you know
you.
that?
Well, suspect would be the different firearms evidence, the cartridge cases. Like I said, there's no absolute. They're not going to throw them the exact same
So
spot, but they
Idaho
will
wants a
throw them
firing
in
squad. Tennessee wants a
a similar
lynching.
direction. We've got cartridge cases in a pretty nice sized perimeter. We've got them at different locations from where Miss Maggie Murdaugh's body, the final resting place, and different angles and different positions in different directions. So that tells you it's very fluid and it's very dynamic.
So if I'm holding a gun and I'm moving and shooting, what is happening with those shell cases as I move?
They are moving as they're ejected.
Where was Maggie's head pointing when she hit the ground?
Miss Maggie Murdaugh's head was pointed in the direction of Paul Murdaugh, where his body rested, back toward the feed room.
What is your opinion of the defense's expert that says the shooter could not have been 6 feet 4 inches tall like the defendant Alec Murdaugh?
I think that's a flawed opinion.
Could it have been a 6'4" person?
It could have been a 5'4", 6'4", or in my opinion, a 7'4", as I just demonstrated.
Hey, Matt, well, we know that the state experts must have gotten through more to the jury because now we know the outcome. But with under 3 hours of deliberations, how long do you think the jurors even spent discussing expert testimony?
Well, the time of the deliberation was really extraordinary. I mean, this was a case that lasted weeks and weeks, many witnesses, and the jurors were back in 2 hours and 50 minutes. That doesn't even give them enough time to discuss just the experts or just really Alec Murdaugh's testimony himself. So I would assume they went around the table. There were a significant majority of jurors who had no question about his guilt. maybe a couple who had some questions. They talked about those briefly, and boom, you have a verdict. You know, I thought it was extraordinary that these 12 jurors would make a decision on such a significant case in such a short period of time. What it tells me is that there was little doubt among a significant majority of the jurors on the very first tally that they took sitting around the table in the jury holding room.
Well, I know Rich Schoenstein likes to gloat on this show sometimes, and I am outright saying that he's right. I mean, at the end of the day, Rich, it wasn't about any of this testimony. The jurors, one of them kept coming out to say he was a liar, he wasn't good enough. It was about Alec Murdaugh, what he said on the stand.
First of all, I never gloat. Let's just get that straight. But yeah, it was about Alec Murdaugh. It was about his credibility. And, you know, it raises a lot of interesting ideas, right? If he hadn't talked to law enforcement at all, it would have been a different trial. If he had not made up things about his travels that night, it would have been a different trial, because there was time he was gone where possibly someone else could have committed the murder. But having found out that he lied about where he was before the murder and he lied about the trip after, don't forget, he said he went to his mom's for 45 minutes. He raced there back and forth at 80 miles an hour and visited for 20. So he lied about before, he lied about after, and that was too much for this jury to take, and they swiftly came to a verdict.
Well, he has a lot of time now to think about whether he really should have taken that stand and how much damage that did for him. All right, we're going to take a quick break, but please don't go anywhere, because remember, the defense press conference is expected to happen any moment now, and we're going to send it out to South Carolina when it does. We're going to take a break. We're going to hopefully see that in a moment. You're watching Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us. We are waiting to jump live in Walterboro, South Carolina for a defense press conference. This after Alec Murdaugh was found guilty of the double murder of his wife and son and then sentenced to life in prison. The disgraced former attorney found his wife Maggie and son Paul deceased on their family property on June 7th of 2021 and is now paying for it. While we wait to go live into this press conference, let's take a look at a juror speaking out just earlier this morning.
Deliberating, going through the evidence. Everybody was pretty much talking, and I don't know, about 45 minutes later, after all our deliberating, we figured it out.
So it took basically 45 minutes for you guys to come to a decision.
Probably about 45, maybe an hour.
That's really fast.
Yeah, the evidence was clear.
So yes, it was very fast, but he says the evidence was there. We've been talking about this interview all morning, and there you just saw it. Rich, your reaction.
45 minutes. That's really when the decision was made. It wasn't even 2 hours and 50 minutes. That's a jury that didn't have a reasonable doubt, didn't have any doubt. And I just want to highlight the jury for a minute, because in a case like this, I always think about jury service. These people sit there for 6 weeks. They look at some of the most horrendous evidence imaginable. We see a sanitized version on the TV, but they're looking at those crime scene pictures. They're looking right at that evidence, and then they have to make a decision about guilt or innocence. The job those jurors do, and juries across this country do, is amazing. Cannot have the judicial system without them.
Well, not only were they looking at all the evidence, but they were looking at Alec Murdaugh himself when he testified. And the jury just seemed to say, look, the tears, there were no tears. There was just snot. Matt, your thoughts?
You know, I think that this case was sealed when the audio disclosed Alec Murdaugh's voice there immediately at the scene before the murders occurred. At that point, the question about him testifying was made. It was cemented at that point. He had to take the witness stand and say, I lied, I was there prior. And what that also did was open him up to this questioning by the prosecution, which I thought was very effective, although some people thought it was overdone. And that was just to pound away at him lying, looking at his clients in the face and lying, looking at his partners and lying, looking at his family and lying, looking at the police and lying, and just pounding away. This guy is a liar. So when he takes the witness stand, is he going to tell you the truth? Can you believe that he's going to be truthful after he's lied repeatedly throughout his life to everybody that's close to him and that he knows well? And of course, the jury rejected that. And I think that video with his voice on it is the difference in this trial. That's what turned this trial.
And perhaps it was very fitting because Judge Clifton Newman this morning looked Alec Murdaugh in the eye and said, when will the lying stop? And while we wait for that defense presser here, let's take a look back at some of the moments that made history from last night and this morning.
The State versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh, defendant. Indictment for murder, SC Code 16-3-0010, CDR Code 0116. Okay. Guilty verdict. Signed by the forelady, 3/2/23. Docket number 2022-GS-15-00593. The State of South Carolina, County of Colleton, in the Court of General Sessions, the July term of 2022. The State versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh, defendant. Indictment for murder, SC Code 16-3-0010, CDR Code 0116. Verdict, guilty. Signed by the forelady. Date 3/2/23. Docket number 2022-GS-15-00595. the State of South Carolina, County of Colleton, Court of General Sessions, July term 2022. The State versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh, defendant. Indictment for possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. SC Code -16-23-0490. CDR Code 0549. Verdict guilty. Signed by the foreperson of the jury. Date 3/2/23. Docket number 2022 GS-15-00594. The State of South Carolina, County of Colleton, Court of General Sessions, July term 2022. The State versus Richard Alexander Murdaugh, defendant. Indictment for possession of a weapon during the commission of a violent crime. SC Code 16-23-0490. CDR Code 0549. Verdict guilty. Signed by the foreperson of the jury. 3/2/23.
Definitely a lot of twists and turns during this whole trial, but the past 24 hours was like a movie. How would you gentlemen just sum it all up as how this ended? Rich, I'm going to start with you.
It's a great tragedy what happened. It's a stunning downfall of someone so powerful with so much to live for. And I think the jury got it right. Justice has been done.
Matt, we have about 40 seconds here.
Yeah, it is. It's a Shakespearean tragedy. I mean, here's a guy who was a renowned lawyer who started stealing his client's money and ultimately murdered his wife and son to try to cover it up or to gain sympathy.
Yes, and he will now get life in prison as that sentencing hearing went down. Don't forget, there is a defense press conference coming up any moment now, but Rich and Matt and I do have to sign off here. We have enjoyed bringing you this coverage. More coverage to soon. Michael Bryant up next. Stay with us.
And hey, everybody, welcome. I am Michael Bryant. This is the Law and Crime Network. Hey, producer Elizabeth, how are those deliberations going in Murdaugh? No. When I was here last, if you would have told me this jury in the case against Mr. Murdaugh for the death of his wife and his son would have been decided in 2 hours, 50 minutes, I would have said you're on some opioids, which probably helped bring down Alex Murdaugh. But sure enough, they came back with that decision, and I got a lot to say about whether I think that's going to stand up or whether we're excited to see Alex Murdaugh 2.0 in the very distant but likely future. We're going to get into all of that, but as you know, he was convicted, and today he was sentenced. Let's go into court. This is what it looked like earlier today.
All right, Mr. Murdaugh, I sentence you to the State Department of Corrections on each of the murder indictments in the murder of your wife, Maggie Murdaugh. I sentence you for the term of the rest of your natural life for the murder of Paul Murdaugh, whom you probably love so much. I sentence you to prison for murdering him for the rest of your natural life.
So maybe the only wrinkle was whether or not these sentences were going to be concurrent or consecutive. And as one little more jab to the defendant, they are consecutive. So when he dies the first time, he's going to be put back in jail till he dies the second time. And of course, the weapons charges all merge because the penalties are far less. We're waiting now for an additional press conference. We believe the defense is going to have a few words to say. So let me start their argument for them. Obviously, there's a huge issue in this case about the level of the evidence that was brought in on those collateral matters, on the financial crimes. Not that they were brought up, not that they were discussed, not that the jury was advised of them, but that witness after witness after witness pounded away on those crimes to the point that it was like, well, is this a murder trial that just happened to stumble into a financial crimes trial? And that's really what it felt like. And I think that's a super strong appellate issue. And we're going to see that. I don't think they may, they may allude to it today. They may not, but I guarantee you the paperwork's going to be working through the system pretty quickly here. And we've already heard from one jury member. And this guy made it clear that we talked about it for about 45 minutes and then we decided to vote. Good thorough analysis there. I'm sure we're going to hear from more jury members. And if I'm on the appellate team, strangely, they haven't asked me to join. But if I'm on the appellate team, I'm tracking all of this for my appellate brief because I think we're going to learn that these jurors relied, at least in part, if not a large part, on those financial crimes testimony to dirty up the defendant, to make it look like, hey, this guy will do anything, including kill his wife and his son. So is that appropriate? I don't know. I think Judge seems like a good guy. Judge Newman seems to be very even-handed, but even today in his comments during sentencing, it made it very clear he bought into the entire prosecution argument. He said this guy will lie about anything, and look what he did. You're still lying today, sir. When is that going to end? It's just amazing that that 61% of our YouTube viewers said, yeah, he's going to be guilty. Not a real surprise. In fact, if you think about it, the overwhelming default position is guilt. That's just the way it works in the system. Why is he there? Why is there a case being put on if he's not guilty? But 61%, even though a majority, it's like, a lot of people had some questions. And I think those questions are going to arise when this case is put into appeal. Okay, we have a little something from Creighton Waters, the prosecutor, who had a few things to say earlier today. Here we go.
And I'm so thankful that the jurors gave them a voice. You heard about Paul. Obviously, there was the vote case, but you also heard him described as a fun-loving young man, a person who loved life, a person who would do anything for his friends, for anyone. And he's cut down as he was just starting to live his life. You heard about Maggie. You heard how sweet she was. You heard that she was a girl's girl who adapted to the outdoorsman life of her sons, how much she loved her sister and her brother-in-law and their children. And she was cut down in the prime of her life. Both of them, like everyone else, was unaware of who he really was. No one who thought they knew this man, no one who thought they were close to this man knew who he really was. And Your Honor, that's chilling. Your Honor, a man like that, a man like this man, should never be allowed to be among free law-abiding citizens again. I would submit to you that the only just sentence here to give justice for Maggie and Paul is the maximum, and that would be 2 consecutive life sentences. Thank you.
So prosecutor Creighton Waters, who no doubt busted his butt on this case and got the ultimate result that he wanted, even through sentencing with the consecutive life sentences there. They did not seek the death penalty, interestingly enough, in this case. And the judge pointed out maybe they should have. I'm keeping an eye on the camera there that shows right now just a mic stand full of a bunch of microphones, but the defense will approach soon enough, and we will go to that as soon as it happens. But in the meantime, I'm lucky to have with me a local attorney from Charleston, South Carolina. Chris Adams is here. He's a criminal defense attorney. He's in the hood down there. So first of all, Chris, thanks for being here. Let me have your reaction to the verdict and the sentencing.
I followed the case very closely, and I was very surprised at the speed of the verdict. That's not to suggest that the jurors did anything improper or cut any corners. I thought there was legitimate circumstantial evidence for them to work through, and they apparently did not have those questions. They must have felt like the proof was clear and overwhelming.
So let me ask you, my favorite topic here, with all of the collateral information that came in under 404, do you think, we know it's an appellate issue, we know it's going to be an appellate issue, do you think it's enough to at least get the appellate court's attention, to give it some serious thought in terms of finding that it is reversible error?
Well, as you know, the number of cases that are reversed on appeal are very minor, a very small number. I think Professor Dershowitz said under 5%. And that may be true, but these are legitimate issues. There are in some jurisdictions, if you testify, you waive a lot of the evidentiary rulings. But that's not the case in South Carolina in regards to 404B admissibility. So the issues should all be preserved. I never thought that they tightly had a nexus to explain why somebody would commit a murder. And so I would think the appellate courts would take them seriously. And then, we can find out down the road how seriously they take them and whether they think it would amount to harmless error or whether it's reversible error.
We heard from one of the jurors already, and of course the person interviewing them probably wasn't as deep into this stuff as we get into it, but the question would have been, would you have voted guilty if you had not learned about all of these financial crimes that he had committed? That's the answer right there. And if any of these jurors say, well, no, I wouldn't have, it's because of that, that's it. So we're going to see how that plays out through the process here. But Chris, and this is an important point you make, and I with all due respect for my much smarter colleague, Linda Kenny Boughton, because I went to State College, she's been saying, hey, he had testified, those issues are all waived. Here's my thinking on that. Give me your thoughts, Chris. You have a law that prevents this collateral information from coming in. And then if somebody testifies and they're effectively being asked about the material that was illegally brought in, and again, my opinion, it was illegally brought in, you've not cured the problem, you've compounded the problem. What do you think?
You and I share that perspective. And you stated it very nicely. The question, I guess, will be how do our appellate courts treat it? South Carolina has a lot of case law favorable to the defense as it relates to 404B. The admissibility and the limitations on it, certainly when compared to federal courts. So I believe historically South Carolina has been more restrictive in their use. They do not value the trials within trials that 404B evidence becomes, and they preserve the right for defendants to be tried on the accusation that they're charged with, not on everything in their life. And this case was particularly troubling to me as I watched, because they argue we need to get this in to show motive, and then they put every financial crime in, 99 of them. And then with each of these witnesses, they would say, well, you thought you knew Alex. You thought you'd known him for 30 years, 20 years, 40 years, and you respected him. You liked him. Now that you know about all this financial misdeeds, what's your opinion? Has it changed? And so they really were using it to attack his character, not to prove motive. And for those folks who aren't trial junkies who might be watching, the rule is one of exclusion. You can't admit evidence to trash somebody's character. You can admit evidence for the limited purpose to show a few exceptions to the traditional rule of not attacking character, and the most commonly used is motive. So the legal argument was motive, and then the practical usage was to trash character. And I would hope that the appellate courts will be concerned with that.
Yeah, a lot of times it's more subtle than that, where we know the fiction that, hey, we'll give a curative instruction. Jury members, this is not to trash his character. It's only to look at motive. But, humans aren't, even attorneys aren't able to sort through a lot of that and make that clear delineation. But as you point out, in this case, you didn't have to, because they actively trashed his character at the end of their testimony about the financial crimes. I think it's outrageous. And I'm no Alec Murdaugh apologist. I don't care if he rots in jail, rots in hell, or both. He's an evil person. But I do kind of care about justice and the system and the way it works and the way it's administered. And hopefully a fair trial is a good thing. Hey, let me ask producer Elizabeth, do you want to squeeze a break in here before they start that trial, the press conference? Or what would you like to do? I'm not at your beck and call here. Okay, let's do that. Let's take a quick break. We're queuing up. You see the lovely stack of microphones there. They will probably be approached by the defense very soon. We will be there when they do. Be right back. And welcome back, everybody. Look, there it is. That's a lovely collection of microphones that have been invited to the courthouse there. We expect to hear from the defense any moment. Are you already having a little bit of Murdaugh withdrawal? Probably less severe than opioid addiction withdrawal, but nonetheless, I can't use this anymore. We'll get over it. We got a lot of cases to cover, as you know. And we're going to get to that press conference as soon as they come back. But what you may have missed, we're going to get into some of the things that have played out in this case. Let's roll some of that now. We'll wait for the defense and get out there when they're live.
It was 2 not guilty, 1 not sure, and 9 guilty.
What was your vote?
Guilty.
From the start?
Yes. Started deliberating, going through the evidence. Everybody was pretty much talking. And about 45 minutes later, after all our deliberating, we figured it out.
So it took basically 45 minutes for you guys to come to a decision?
Probably about 45, maybe an hour.
That's really fast.
Yeah, the evidence was clear.
When he said it was him, were you surprised?
I was very surprised.
Why?
That was his only savior right there.
Okay, pulling out of that because defense is queuing up. Let's go live to their presser.
I'm Dick Harpootlian. This is Jim Griffin. That's Emily Dale. That's Maggie Fox. That's Holly Miller. And this is Phil Barber. We are Alec Murdaugh's defense team. We're able to answer your questions. We're not going to make a statement. I know y'all don't want one. So, anybody got a question?
Do you think it was a mistake to put Alex Murdaugh on the stand?
No. Next.
Mr. Harpootlian, why did you object to that jury being dismissed yesterday?
Why didn't I?
Why didn't you?
Well, for 2 reasons. One, she admitted she talked to other people about the case, but not specifically. But technically, I think the judge had leeway to excuse her, but she clearly, after we interviewed her back in chambers, in my mind, had not made up her mind. And I thought that was important.
You think she would have held your case?
I don't know. She didn't express an opinion to us. She said she was open. She hadn't made up her mind.
Mr. Harpootlian, the defense has made a great deal of points about SLED and their handling the investigation. For your position in the Senate, do you feel there's an opportunity to address that from a legislative standpoint?
I think there were significant issues, but I won't be addressing that in the Senate unless it comes up in a bill. I'm not going to mix this role with my role as a senator. I would not do that.
Why do you think that the prosecutors didn't seek the death penalty in this case? And what do you make of the judge's comments after the verdict that he agreed with the jurors?
Go ahead. Death penalty. What now? Death penalty question. What was the question again? I'm sorry. Why didn't they seek the death penalty? Well, I'm somebody that's prosecuted and defended a bunch of death penalty cases. And clearly, you never do it in a circumstantial case. Because you're not 99 times out of 100, a jury's not going to sentence somebody to death without I saw him do it, he confessed, or great forensic evidence at the minimum. They had none of that here. Secondly, in a death penalty case, it gives us the ability to individually voir dire jurors, which would have been very helpful here. And the prosecution obviously didn't want that. So I don't disagree with, if I'd been prosecuting this case, I probably wouldn't have brought it, but based on, what we heard was presented to the Colleton County Grand Jury by Detective Owen that Jim crossed, blood spatter that didn't exist, testimony about guns that was wrong. I can go through the litany with you. Going back to his question, I think SLED needs to do some self-examination on the forensic processing. They did not. One of the things we complained about was that Maggie's phone would have had all her GPS data on it if they processed it within 5 days. And they because they didn't, the GPS data got overridden. It was just one, which would have been helpful to Alec. It's fingerprints, footprints, and all kinds of forensic things that weren't done.
So what was the question about the
What
judges?
did you make about the judge's comments after the verdict, that he agreed with it and thought it was the right conclusion?
He's entitled to his opinion.
Mr. Herculean, can you expect an appeal anytime soon?
10 days we'll be filing an appeal.
What do you believe the strongest grounds for an appeal are?
What'd you say?
What do you believe the strongest grounds for an appeal are?
But, it was the admission of all the financial crime evidence. And that was offered up, as evidence of motive, that because he was confronted about one financial transaction involving attorney's fees by the chief accountant of the law firm, that was being offered as motive for why he would go home and kill his wife and son, which we thought was illogical and ludicrous. And there really was no evidence linking one to the other, and we did not think it should come in. Not only did that come in, but every other financial misdeed that they could bring in over the last 10 or 15 years was allowed in. And we think that we strongly objected. We respect the judge's decision, but we believe that was an erroneous decision. And we believe that the judge was somewhat misled, because at the conclusion of the case, when Mr. Metters is up on his rebuttal argument in front of the jury, he says to the jury, "Oh, forget about all that motive evidence. We don't have to prove motive. We just have to prove malice," which is right. But why did they go to all the effort to prove motive when at the end they say, you don't have to believe us on our motive theory? But by then they had cast Alec as a despicable human being, and that was the reason they offered it in the first place. And we think the appellate courts will take a strong look at that. We feel like that is a very solid ground for an appeal, and we're going to pursue that.
Looking back at the last 6 weeks, long trial, would you guys do anything different in the last 6 weeks? How you handle
No.
anything in this trial?
No. I mean, look, once the judge, first of all, we believe if the judge was going to let that stuff in, it should have been limited to the Ferris case, which is what they were asking him about on Monday on the feed. Number two, Tinsley, the person that made the motion to compel to be heard on Thursday, Dawes Cook, Alex's lawyer, both agreed it wasn't going to be any storm or Armageddon or anything that was going to happen that Thursday. The judge might have issued an order, which months down the line might have posed a problem. So once they got that character information is he's a thief, he's a liar, then it dictated this jury had to think he was a despicable human being and not to be believed. So it was about character. It wasn't about motive. So as a result, our options were limited. Should he take the stand? Well, we debated that. He always wanted to take the stand. But once that information was in, I mean, he had to take the stand to explain the kennel video, the lie, if you will. He had to, but he had no credibility. His credibility had been stripped away by the financial
Do you believe his claim today that he's innocent?
Yes.
How was Buster doing, and why did he choose not to speak in the sentencing?
We could have had Mother Teresa up there speaking on behalf of Alec at sentencing. I mean, he was getting a double life sentence. That was expected. I mean, this is Judge Newman. He's a very stringent punisher when it comes to crimes and sentences. I mean, that was never in dispute. And so for Buster to get up and speak on his dad's behalf would not have made a difference. And why do you want to put that kid through more trauma than anybody that we can imagine has ever been through?
Have his feelings about his dad changed at all in the trial?
What's that?
Have his feelings about his dad changed at all?
I can't speak to Buster's feelings. I can tell you this. There was a lot of effort by the state to convince the family that Alec is the murderer. The family came to trial every day for 6 weeks, expecting to hear proof positive that he killed Maggie and Paul, something that they had not heard before. After 6 weeks of trial, they came away more convinced that he did not do this, and they steadfastly in his camp and support him. And that's where they stand.
What's next for Alex?
Well, Alex will be leaving shortly to go to Columbia to R&E, it's called, where he'll be at the South Carolina Department of Corrections. He'll be evaluated. That's about a 30-day process, and then he'll be sent to wherever the correctional facility that they assign him to. So,
Is he doing special security measures for him?
no, I don't think. You know, Alec was not optimistic that with all of the scrutiny and press and all of his bad acts being out in the public, in the world, you know, media domain, that he could get, you know, a jury to put out all the noise and just focus on the murder. And so coming in, he was somewhat pessimistic. He became optimistic as we got through the process. But I got to tell you, and all you reporters, you know the whole story, I'm sure. And if you're sitting on that jury, they heard everything that would be in an HBO documentary, a Netflix documentary about the Murdaugh family dynasty downfall, except the Stephen Smith matter. I mean, so we were hoping to get a jury to put all, you know, that could ignore the noise, focus on the murder, and we ended up trying a case that they could have watched on Netflix.
Does your legal team have any regrets about the way that you guys performed in this trial? Do you feel like you did? Do you feel like you were outmatched in some margin?
Oh, absolutely not. I mean, not outmatched. I mean, look, they won this case the day the judge bought into letting them put every piece of, you know, stealing from kids who lost their mother, from somebody with pancreatic cancer, somebody that's a paraplegic. I mean, all of that 2.5 weeks. By the time they got done with it, it didn't matter about final argument. It didn't matter about what we put up. They would never, ever, ever acquit him after that.
Last question, guys. Can you just
Last question.
What your grounds for appeal will be? You said it's going to be 10 days to lay out your key arguments in that.
We'll file something not in 10 days, but we'll file a notice of intention to appeal. Then we've got 30 days, I think, to file a brief.
Yeah, so you file the notice within 10 days. You got to get a transcript.
Oh, that'll take a while.
That'll take months before they type up everything, and then we start briefing.
Are you all going to handle the appeal
Yes.
and argue it in the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court?
And the U.S. Supreme Court.
And the U.S. Supreme Court if necessary. That's correct.
What's the federal issue?
Doyle.
Oh, there's a huge federal issue. That's why I got so animated, and the judge told me to sit down. Part of the trial is the state eliciting or asking questions of Alec about why he did not come forward and tell law enforcement where he was at the time of the kennel video. And that was after he was arrested. And there's U.S. Supreme Court cases are clear that post-arrest silence cannot be used against you. And that is a classic violation of the Fifth Amendment. And we feel strongly that if we lose at the state courts, we'll have success at the federal
Can you
court.
tell us about the plea negotiations before trial?
No.
There were no plea negotiations.
There weren't any.
They never offered him anything.
If you think Alec is innocent, what effort are you making to find the real killer, or what effort is he making?
Not our job to find the real killer. If they had taken fingerprints, if they'd gotten footprints, if they hadn't destroyed, if they preserved Maggie's phone with her GPS, if they had not, they misrepresented to the grand jury that they had a shirt with his blood on it. If Owen had opened his email, he says he didn't get, would have told him a year before there was no human blood on that T-shirt. It was a comedy of errors in terms of forensics on this. So do I have faith that they would find the real killer? No.
Is Alec for Buster's safety?
We don't know. What? Last question. Say that one more time.
Did you support putting Alec Murdaugh on the stand?
There was no choice.
Why?
Because he'd been made out to be a monster who stole from children and crippled people and that's not a politically correct word. I'm sorry, I'm an old guy. Crippled people who had just done horrible, despicable things. And he had to try to push back on that. And if he let that lay without taking the stand, he was toast. Taking the stand, could he pull it off? Apparently did.
In hindsight, do you regret not asking for a change of venue in this case?
Not really, because we checked. We did focus groups in this case in a county way far away from here. 8 of the 10 people on the 2 focus groups knew all about this case. I mean, there was nowhere you could go that you could find, we believe you could find a jury that didn't know, hadn't watched TV, hadn't read the stuff you write or the stuff, the Twitter stuff. And by the way, one of the good piece of information as this trial is over, Griffin can start tweeting again.
That's right.
All right, thank you guys. Thank you. Thank you.
Great question.
That's pretty good. A lot in that mix. Some of the stuff we had just talked about, which of course was their main concern, the 404 financial crimes information that came pouring in and really overwhelmed the murder trial. That's going to be front and center in that appeal when they file it in 10 days. That's to perfect their right. Then there's a lot of paperwork, transcripts got to be produced. It's a lot. But they also mentioned the possible federal appeal, which is interesting because of that Fifth Amendment issue where there was a question about.
Well, there you have it, y'all. They're going to try to appeal within 10 days and take a hot minute for transcripts and yada, yada, yada. But yeah, they definitely were bullies into people on the stand. They just wouldn't shut up until they were able to think that whoever they were interviewing or questioning would fall for their narrative, which was just absurd. It would annoy the hell out of me. So thank you so much for all the new members. I never thought in a million years I'd get this far in the YouTube world. And I look forward to hosting a live tonight with Betty. Yes, cut and shoot. They did do a presser last night. Did you not see that? Did anybody see the presser from last night? Let's look. Here, I'll share it really quick. I believe this is just the presser.
Wow, what a great day for the people of South Carolina. I want to thank every one of you for being here tonight. There's a lot of emotion here tonight at this courthouse. A lot of a year and a half, nearly 2 years of blood, sweat, and tears, it feels like. A lot of hard work from so many people. So if you will just bear with me.
Oh, Blue, I just activated it yesterday.
There's a lot of people I have to thank. But first, those of you who don't know, I'm Alan Wilson. I'm South Carolina's Attorney General, and I got the best staff of any Attorney General in the United States of America. I want to start by thanking our prosecution team. I want to tell you, I've been here for nearly 6 weeks with this team, living in a hotel, and it felt almost like being in a dorm environment in college. Late nights, cramming, studying, little sleep, away from our families, getting up early, getting here to the courthouse, working long hours.
My pleasure. I enjoyed listening to this.
At times, but it was all worth it. It was all worth it because we got to bring justice and be a voice for Maggie and Paul Murdaugh and bring justice for the people of South Carolina. I'd like to start real briefly by thanking our team. First, excuse me, and put my glasses on. Our chief prosecutor, I tell you, I appointed Creighton Waters to be the chief prosecutor of this case nearly a year and a half ago. And I want to say I'm pretty brilliant because I picked the right guy. And I want to say thank you to Creighton Waters. Creighton, you did a fantastic job. I don't think there's another attorney in the state of South Carolina that could have led this Herculean effort. But Creighton will be the first to tell you he didn't do it alone because he had a team of people. I want to first thank Don Zelinka, who is actually Creighton's boss. He is the Deputy Attorney General, been in the Attorney General's office for over 40 years, sitting here to my immediate left. Don Zelinka, thank you so much. John Metters, many of you got to see him do the closing argument today. John, thank you. You've been a phenomenal add to our team. I'm going to go quickly through the names, but as I read the names, please raise your hand. You know Creighton, you saw Don, and you see John. David Fernandez, John Conrad, Johnny James, Savannah Gowd, Ozzie Toledo, Shane Aceto,
Yes.
Carly Jewell,
Yes.
Carson Burney,
Yes.
Danielle Colon,
Yes.
and our victims advocate, Trisha Allen.
Yes.
I also want to say thank you to the South Carolina Law Enforcement Division. Mark Keel assigned some amazing men and women. And when I say it was an agency-wide effort on behalf of SLED, I can't underscore that part enough. Every time I called Chief Keel, every time I reached out to the lead agents, every time Creighton was asking me, hey, General, we need something from SLED, we would reach out to SLED, and they were there. They busted their butts. I can't begin to list every agent, and some can't be listed for obvious reasons. Some are standing up here tonight. I told them I wasn't going to mention their names, but we would not be here if it wasn't for SLED. And I want to thank Mark Keel and his team and all of the men and women across the entire state law enforcement division for what they did to make tonight a possibility.
Amen.
I also want to thank the FBI and the Secret Service, our federal partners. We had to utilize many of their assets and resources. We couldn't do all the things that we did without our federal partners. We had a lot of local partners. We had the Colleton County Sheriff's Department, Buddy Hill, Sheriff Hill and his team providing the security. They did a phenomenal job, and they were there. They were the first responders the night on June 7th, 2021, when Maggie and Paul were butchered brutally. They were the first responders, and they were the first ones to be there. The Charleston County Sheriff's Office, the Orangeburg County Sheriff's Office were instrumental in supporting our investigative efforts. You all know Kenny Kinsey, our chief crime scene expert, was with the Orangeburg Sheriff's Office. I also want to thank the city of Walterboro. I think the mayor is here somewhere, and the police department. They provided security. Thank you. This whole community has embraced our entire team, and I cannot thank you enough. We've all been away from our families, 2 hours away from our families for the past 2 months. And it's this community that made us, we would walk into restaurants and people would come up and thank us. You know, you don't have any idea how good that makes people feel when they're under an incredible amount of stress, an incredible amount of scrutiny, and this community really embraced us. I want to thank the Colleton County Clerk of Court, Becky Hill, and her entire team and their staff. I don't know. I call her Becky Booth. That's her nickname. But Madam Clerk, wherever you are tonight. I'm sorry. That's my pet name for her. But I want to thank you, Madam Clerk, for you, the entire team, the bailiffs, the court security, the staff here. There was no role that was too small that they weren't willing to do for us. The security team here, it was a Herculean effort by everybody, and I can't thank enough people. I don't know if I mentioned the bailiffs, but I want to thank them. And there's another group of people who you don't know who they are, but that's the jurors. And not just the jurors, but the alternates, the ones who didn't even get to serve to the very end, but people who were taken away from their families. I want to thank the families of our jurors who sat here every single day for what seemed like long amounts of tedious, monotonous information and evidence. Sometimes people didn't know what it meant. They didn't understand it, and they had to sit there and process it and hear it over and over and over again. And I want to thank these nameless jurors whose identities have been protected. They may make their identities available to all of you at some point, but they sat there and they delivered justice tonight, and I want to thank them for their role in this process. You know, Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government except for every other kind. I kind of want to adopt that and say we may have the worst criminal justice system in the world, but it's better than every other kind that there is. And our criminal justice system worked tonight. It gave a voice to Maggie and Paul Murdaugh, who were brutally mowed down and murdered on the night of June 7th, 2021 by someone that they loved and someone that they trusted. And they couldn't be here to testify for themselves tonight. Their testimony came through the evidence and the information that was gathered by the men and women of the agencies I've just mentioned. It came from the testimony of the agents and the investigators and the attorneys and the folks in our staff who were able to get it to the court record. And so I want to say tonight, their voice was heard tonight and justice was brought for them. We can't bring them back, but we can bring them justice. I started off my remarks by saying that it is a good day in South Carolina.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Today's verdict proves that no one, no matter who you are in society, is above the law.
Amen. Thank you. Thank you.
A lot of people doubted that this process would work, and hopefully, for those who did doubt the process, hopefully we have instilled and put a little bit of faith back into you and your lives as you view this process as it unfolds. I'm proud of this team. I'm proud of the men and women standing behind me tonight. And there's been a lot of emotion. And I just want to say from the bottom of my heart, I saw firsthand for the last 5 or 6 weeks the countless nights where you were up beyond midnight and you were getting up before dawn, not eating. I was watching Nancy Grace the other night and I heard her call Creighton pale and gaunt because Creighton wasn't eating and sleeping. He really wasn't, folks. I'm serious. You know, we would have to bring in kind bars and things to eat during breaks. But Creighton, Herculean effort, my friend. And I am truly honored to have you on our team. Thank you for being a great leader and a great chief prosecutor. And I would like to invite you to come up here and make some remarks for the folks here tonight.
Thanks, everybody. And I want to start by thanking this guy who's given me and all these folks behind us opportunities to do justice, which is what we want to do with our careers. It is very tough and demanding, but it's rewarding for moments like these. The general stole a lot of my lines, but I also want to thank the jurors for their long and arduous service. And we had no doubt that if we had a chance to present our case in a court of law, that they would see through the one last con that Alec Murdaugh was trying to pull. And they did, and we're so grateful for that. I get to lead the state grand jury section in the Attorney General's office. This particular case is not a state grand jury case. There are other indictments that are state grand jury. But the one thing about that is that I have an amazing team. And I want to be clear, this was a team effort. Y'all saw all of these folks behind me doing amazing work. And I can't be prouder of a team in my life. We called this our Super Bowl, and not because of the media attention, but just because of the effort that we knew that we would have to put into this. And we didn't really get to watch much of the Super Bowl that went on because when we arrived, I think it was winter and it feels like spring now. But every single member of this team, every single member of the state grand jury staff, what we do well is work together as a team in complex investigations. And who we work with is my partners at SLED. And I can't thank them enough as well because we're used to working on these complex cases and working together. And I'm not leaving out Sheriff Hill and the Colleton County Sheriff's Office and our federal partners in Orangeburg and Charleston Sheriff's Office and all the other agencies that have worked on this case. I also want to thank Ms. Becky, if she's still up there, because she's been amazing. The clerk staff has been amazing. The court staff has been amazing. The bailiffs have been amazing. And again, I also want to thank this community who really has embraced us and has been so great to us and made us able to survive this process that has been long and arduous. And I have been sleeping. I hadn't been. And I have been eating more than Kind bars every now and then. But, and I'm sure that's a nice plug for Kind. But anyway, it really has been a great process. We will have sentencing tomorrow. Obviously, we're not going to comment on sentencing because that's still pending. But justice was done today. It doesn't matter who your family is. It doesn't matter how much money you have or people think you have. It doesn't matter what you think, how prominent you are. If you do wrong, if you break the law, if you murder, then justice will be done in South Carolina. And I think South Carolina has shown to the nation and the world how a process can work and work well. Thank y'all.
And also, I want to thank Creighton. I told Creighton, I said, Creighton, I'm going to come down and I'm going to be just a staff attorney. I know I'm your boss. I'm your boss's boss's boss, but I said I'm going to come down and I'm going to help. And I said I'm going to follow instruction. And I hope I was true to my word. this past weekend, I was saying, what can I do to help? I said, I'm willing to take a witness if it'll help. He said, actually, it would. So he let an old prosecutor dust off his cleats and get back in the game and to help the team out. And
I got to be the boss of the boss for a while.
yeah, don't get used to it.
I'm not used to it.
No, but in all seriousness, I'm proud of the decisions that I made in putting the people behind me and to the left and right of me in charge of this case. And I was honored to be part of this team. Just another member, just another worker bee in the trenches trying to bring justice to the people of this state and to bring justice to the people who couldn't be here tonight because they were brutally murdered by someone they trusted. Now, with that being said, I know a lot of people want to talk to us. A lot of people want to talk to some of the attorneys and the support staff and the agents, investigators here tonight. Some of you want to talk to me and others. We're going to make ourselves available to you. But like Mr. Waters just said, tomorrow there's a sentencing hearing, and we don't want to get out in front of our skis. And plus, I'm starting to feel the rain come down. But I promise you, we're going to make ourselves available to talk to members of the media, to talk to all of you out there that have questions. We'll answer any questions that we ethically can. We hope you'll continue to be patient with us as we finish this process tomorrow. Again, we're going to go back and get a good night sleep tonight. But again, thank you. I'm going to also, one last group that we didn't thank, the media. You all, I know a lot of people in this, polarizing world we live in, a lot of people take shots at the media, but the media was incredibly respectful. You were so good, not just to us, but listen, to the families of the victims, okay? I know this is an awkward situation, but, you protected the identities of people and, you protected the process. And I want to thank you for your part in this and telling the stories, educating the public on what's going on out there. So now I'm going to stop speaking as an attorney general, and I'm going to close as a father and as a husband to say that when you go home tonight, hug your loved ones, hug your spouse, hug your children, because this case reminds us of anything that you can't take for granted that people in your family are always going to be there. And right now, when I get home tomorrow, I'm going to hug mine, and I hope you hug yours. But thank you again. Thank you for your prayers.
Yes, sir.
Thank you for your prayers. You came and prayed for me. I see a lot of people come up and say, we're praying for you. We appreciate your prayers. Thank you all so much. And this is going to conclude this press conference. We look forward to talking to all of you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm gonna let you go right here. I just want to thank you and your staff. Y'all just did a good job. God bless you. Thank y'all very much. Thank
All right, y'all. Well, there you have it. There was the prosecution and their statements from last night, right after the verdict was read. 45 minutes on deliberation on the verdict, and then maybe a half hour in court to set the 2 consecutive life settings. So I am going to take a break. I will see you all on these YouTube streets, in and out channels. Until then, about 9:30, Miss T and Betty effing up the YouTube streets on a Friday night. Have a beautiful night. Stay blessed. Don't forget to smile or be someone's smile, and enjoy the rest of your day. Love y'all. Thank you for joining me.